Welcome to the Connected Leaders Academy virtual conference designed to reshape your vision of transformation. As we navigate the evolving business landscape, our speakers will unveil innovative strategies to manage and initiate change. Prepare to adapt, innovate, and lead, ensuring your role as a catalyst in this transformative era.
When life pushes you back, how do we turn the tables and end up winning and moving forward? Hi, I'm Andi Buerger, and I'm here to share some ideas, some thoughts, and some very personal experiences because I've had a lot of time in the backwards motion during my life. So hang on, hang tight, here we go. First of all, when we talk about moving forward and moving backward, the key word is motion. There's motion either in front of us or behind us. And sometimes we get stuck in the middle. But let me start from the beginning of how I began learning to move forward and also how to learn to live fearlessly in a world that is often turbulent. In the early 60s, I was born into a family that was very violent and very predatory. By the time I was 5, even though there was no term for human trafficking, I had already been trafficked by immediate and some extended family members. And at that age of 5, I was ready to end my life. I didn't want to be in this world. I wanted to be at peace. And the only thing I could think of would be to kill myself by jumping in front of a car in front of our home. And as drastic as that sounds, when you're a tiny child and there is no one there to protect you, no one to talk to, and nowhere to go, it sounded like a pretty good idea. But I will tell you, that particular day, no car came by. And while I was waiting, I looked into this huge blue sky. And I thought, I wonder if somebody made that. How far does it go? Is there someone bigger than the people that are hurting me? And I didn't think I would live long enough to find out. But in that moment, on that curb in front of my home, God met me. I heard this voice within my heart, and it said, he said, "This is not the plan I have for you. Suicide is not the answer." And I was amazed that anyone knew why I was on that curb that day. But that voice was so sure, so resonant that I wanted to trust it, and I did. I went back up to the garage and I leaned against the door. And as I was contemplating this voice, I simply said, "If you keep me alive, I will do whatever you call me to do." And calling is different than wanting. So calling was a very specific word, and I remember it as clearly as it was yesterday. From that point on, it wasn't necessarily easy. I tried to take my life a couple more times before the age of 10, but every time someone, some spirit, God interceded in my life and kept me from doing that. At the age of 17, that was the last time my birth mother tried to take my life. Again, there was intercession, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But from that point on, once I got to college, I was able to see how other people lived, and I was shocked. I was amazed. I was intellectually ahead, but very emotionally behind. So relationships were very difficult and challenging. I didn't really know how to date. I didn't really know how to see some of the signs of trouble. But at every point in my life, God never forgot me. He kept me moving forward. There was work. I had a great work ethic. I was first in, last out. I would do any job, anytime, for anyone, as long as I could keep moving. I actually started working at age 11 to stay away from the people that hurt me as often as I could. But in the regular work world after college, I realized that I wanted something more. And out of the devastation of my early life, I wanted to do something good. I wanted to not only move forward in my own life, but to help others move forward. And moving forward, yes, it's motion, but we have to initiate that. No matter how bad our circumstances are, no matter how desperate things seem, it is our act, our choice to move that will change our circumstances. And yes, faith has a huge part in that, and we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. But at this point, after college, I decided to go to law school. I put myself through, I worked a couple of jobs, and I realized that just wasn't the justice I was looking for. In that time, kids were still being sent home to their abusive parents, which to me was not right. And it was sensationalized. A lot of big cases like OJ and the Menendez brothers and other people were being celebrated for things. And a lot of times the lawyers were not really interested in justice as much as they were about TV time. So I decided I am going to go change the world my own way. I took my law degree, went back to business, and every decision I made was a step forward, not only in my own growth, because I hadn't really fully dealt with everything that had happened to me at that time. I unfortunately had married a man that became an abuser, or probably was an abuser before I married him. And so in that time, I made the choice in order to go forward, I'd have to go backwards a little bit and go to counseling. And counseling was one of the best things that I did. I learned how to communicate my needs. I learned how to deal with the pain, not only of the obvious pain, but the underlying pain, the grief of losing my childhood, my teenagehood, the grief of not feeling confident about who I was and that I had value and I had worth. And so in living forward, every single step seemed like I was carrying a bag of bricks on my back. But counseling helped me to move forward. And I remember thinking, don't ever look back. The rear view does not have a great view. And not only that, you're liable to get into an accident if you keep looking back. So looking forward and then beginning to live forward, beginning to say, I'm okay. I may not be perfect. I may not be everywhere I want to be yet, but I'm okay today. And I will work on being even more okay every time I make a decision. So the fence sitting part is where a lot of people get stuck. They're not sure, do I go forward? Do I go backward? I don't have anything presently in my life that I can see that I can move. But again, it's a choice. It's a small choice sometimes every moment of the day. Sometimes it's a bigger choice, and sometimes that choice involves other people, whether it's family or friends or mentors, people that you respect. Maybe it's a stranger. Sometimes a stranger will enter into our lives and they'll be just what we need in that moment. I call them stranger angels because sometimes that's exactly what they are. But as I remember, as I started moving forward after law school into business, I worked for a lot of CEOs of major companies, whether they were media companies or huge retailing companies, and I learned a lot. I watched, I learned, and then I figured out, can I do this better? I worked faster and harder than anybody else because I wanted to be known as the person that they could count on, the person that I had wished I had had in my life. And in doing so, I had great opportunities. So that forward motion began in baby steps, partly learning to believe in myself enough to say, I can do that. I can do that job, or I can help that person. And then as I grew emotionally and mentally in my faith, and I remember experiencing God, not just knowing Him in my head, not as a blind faith child, but as a real spiritual being, a father, a friend. And in my life, I didn't have any of that. And so this was really new for me. So my faith began as a baby would begin eating, and then it grew. And the more it grew, the more choices I made to move forward, the more choices I made to help others, the greater that love and that joy became. And so at some point, there were also times where things went a little bit backwards or a little bit sideways, and a couple of those things I'm going to talk to you about right now. Besides a divorce, which was necessary, I call it deliverance. And sometimes deliverance does not come in the package we would like it to be, but it is still deliverance. And I was delivered from a horribly abusive marriage. And in the time after that divorce, God and me got together a lot. We started with little baby steps. I read a book called Streams in the Desert, a very old book, but daily devotional. And every day I learned something. Every day I was fed. I fueled my mind, my soul, my body. I worked a couple of different jobs, even as a corporate level manager, but I had to take care of myself in a different way. And then one moment, I was invited to go to a chapel service. And in that service, the woman speaking was very powerful, very gentle, but there were only 2 seats left when my friend and I got there. And don't you know, it was the front pew. So we sat there, and I probably cried the entire 2 hours. Whatever was happening, there was a shift going on. There was motion going on within me. And after the speaker was done, she came into my pew. She didn't say a word. She simply sat next to me. She put her arms around me and she started rocking me back and forth, side to side. And I remember thinking, wow, that must be what a real mother, a safe mother, must do when she's comforting her child. And that was one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life. I was 32 years old and I had never felt that. So God again was moving me forward in an emotional way, as well as spiritual. And I took that feeling, that light, that joy that I felt of being held to the 10th degree. I started looking for all different kinds of ways to do that for others. But I also knew I had to be smart about where I was, what I did as I continued through business. I made a lot of money for a lot of people, but I did not have those millions. So I went and I would do whatever work I could do to continue moving my service desire of my heart forward, whether it was watching kids while their parents were getting rehab or whatever it took. I made sure I got involved in community because community is one of the keys of getting through adversity, disasters, heartaches, betrayals. I know I've been betrayed and it's painful, and I'm sure many others have been in that seat. It doesn't feel good, it's horrible. But when we use that energy to move forward and we refuse to buy the lies that the world tells us, as I used to tell some of the kids we rescued, keep moving. Don't buy the lies. The world will sell you anything that it can. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not tall enough. You're not manly enough. Whatever it is, the world would love to tell you lies and hope that you would believe them. But if you're moving forward, the world can't catch you. And that's one of the things that I really believe in. Our passion, our energy, that forward motion is how we live forward and actually how we come to live joyously each day. Each day may not look like it has joy, but if we look more intently with intention, we can find joy in every day. I know people that were dying of cancer and they could still find joy in the day somewhere. So again, forward motion, intention, not buying lies that the world can tell us and sell us, but to keep moving. And that's how we start becoming fearless. So when I talk about fearless, especially when it comes to having fearless faith, there are a couple different things involved. First of all, fearlessness doesn't mean we're not afraid. I'm afraid of a lot of things, which I'm not going to reveal here, but I can be fearless because I know when the time comes, in that moment, my mind is going to override my emotional response. And that's the key. We can have the warrior attitude. We can be fearless in our passions, in our ministries, in our work, in our families, without sacrificing the human part of, yeah, I'm a little afraid too, but you know what I do know? God never fails. God has never failed me in my life. And there have been a lot of opportunities to test that theory. One of them was in 2008. I had the fourth of 10 traumatic brain injuries. This one cost me a year of memory, and I had no job. I couldn't work, couldn't even tell you what day it was, definitely couldn't drive very well. And while I was recovering, I thought, what am I going to do? Is this it? Am I always going to be this way? I was a little bit of a fence sitter, but I had a really great cognitive therapist who said, Andi, your brain is just going to work differently from here on out, but it's still going to work. And I thought, she's right. It still works, and I'm going to find a way to make it work for me and for God and for the community I live in. And that's where the idea for Beulah's Place, which was our shelter, and over a 14-year period of time, we rescued over 300 plus at-risk homeless teens in our area, some of whom were trafficked, some were abandoned, some were kicked out, some left what was worse than they thought would be on the street. So, in that matter, that turned out to be a great plus. And that motion, even though it seemed negative at the time, it was very positive because it led me to what I've been doing the last 20 years. And even though during COVID we had to close our shelter, those 300 plus youth, the 18 to 21-year-olds that we helped, some went to college, some started families. But what I know is because of that motion forward and being fearless, even when I was threatened with guns and with death because some of the boyfriends or the stalkers wanted to find them, I knew that those generations would be forever changed. And to me, that was worth any price. There are other times that come up spontaneously. Between law school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I decided to go and try out for a game show. Who doesn't love game shows, right? So I wanted to be on a game show really badly. And while I was standing in line in the heart of LA, if anyone's ever been to Los Angeles, the downtown area isn't necessarily the most protected area. But here we were, 100 plus of us lined up around the studio building. And for whatever reason, a gentleman came walking up, and you could tell that he was angry and possibly not 100% aware of what he was doing. And he suddenly stopped, and I don't know why, but he picked me out of the crowd and he advanced towards me. And the girl next to me was feeling very nervous. She started to tremble and she started to cry because she thought this man was going to hurt us. And I had a choice. And this is where fearless came in. I could either let that man terrorize her, terrorize me, and anyone else around me, or I could deal with it with the wisdom God had given me. So the first thing I did was I turned to the young girl and I said, look, I want you to look me in the eye and I want you to smile, even though it's hard right now. I want you to pretend that we're having a really good conversation, okay? Can you do that? And she said, yes, and I held her hand. And then after she calmed down a little bit, I turned and I faced that gentleman. He was so angry and spitting at me and doing all this crazy stuff. He kept saying, you never called me. You never called me. You think you're all this, and a few other things that he thought about who he thought I was. And I looked at him and I said, you're right. I should have called you back. And I am so sorry I didn't. And all of a sudden, his energy changed. His eyes got sad. They went wide. They went sad. And he walked away. And he sauntered off to wherever else he was going to go live for that night. But only God could have given me that wisdom. Not one person stepped forward to protect me or the other girl that was standing next to me, but God was there. So fearless faith sometimes is just the simplicity of listening to your heart and knowing the wisdom of God, that He always has our back, no matter what. Another time that was very, very serious for Ed and myself, my husband and me, I was very ill. I didn't know how ill at the time, and I was supposed to speak in Washington, D.C. for another nonprofit about child abuse in the nation. And I was having a lot of difficulty. Basically, my liver was failing. Even though I didn't drink, it was just having trouble. We went to a specialist, and she basically said, Andi, if you get on that plane, I don't think you're going to make it to the other side. So we need to really dig in and figure out what's happening. And Ed and I had a choice. We could have been very terrified. We could have been very scared. But God knew us well enough, one, to have someone we hadn't heard from for a long time, call and say, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know I'm praying for you today, out of the blue. And then again, there was another text message. So during that process of figuring out what was going on, which ended up being celiac-induced liver failure, and what the healing process would be, God was there. Just like when the doctor said, you know, I think you might have liver cancer. And I knew in that second, it was all in or all out with God. And I looked at him, I said, I appreciate your assessment and I will do your tests. But I'm telling you right now, I do not believe that is what God has planned for my life after everything I've been through and everything I need to do still. So I will not have liver cancer. Talk about gutsy, right? I don't even know how that came out of my mouth, but I knew God and I knew God in me. And so fearless faith sometimes is just trusting someone that you know will never fail you, which is God, and not just yourself. And 4 days later, we got the confirmation. It was a quiet 4 days, but we got confirmation I did not have liver cancer. My liver just had a really hard time because of the autoimmune situation. So a few of those examples, but in this day and age where everything is a little bit mixed up, where the world is struggling, we're struggling, the most important thing is to make the choice to move forward, to take steps. And if you're stuck, then you get counsel. I have a tribe, as some people call it. I have people I know I can call and say, hey, I am struggling with this, or I think I know what I want to do, but I don't want to sit on the fence and I need help. Can you give me your input? So living forward sometimes means bringing other people with you, which is not a bad thing. If they're dysfunctional, that might be a little different, but basically you're going to pick people, choose people that you know value and respect you, that want you to succeed, that want you to be as happy as you can. And whether it's cancer or it's a divorce or the loss of a child, I've lost a child in miscarriage. I know how that feels. But you know what I do know is that he's an angel in heaven, and there will be a time where I will see him again because I have that much belief. And I know when I think of my boy that there's that special thing that a mom still has. And I would never have said that if I hadn't gone through it. I never wanted to be a mother of any kind because I thought I would end up being like my birth mother, who was the orchestrator of all evil. But out of all those children, all those youth that we rescued, Ed and I became parents in our 60s. Okay, he's a little bit older than 60. I'm the young one. But we adopted one of those girls, and she has been a delight. She is now a social service worker with her master's, and she chose, despite everything that happened in her life, to move forward, to use her energy to help others, to help herself, and to have fearlessness as one of her main assets, along with character and compassion. So I hope that this has been helpful. Again, keep moving. Don't buy the lies. You have value and worth. Believe it and use it for the benefit of others who need to know it as well.
Thank you for participating in today's enlightening session. As we transition to our next expert, remember that each strategy and insight is a step toward becoming a transformative leader in your field. Visit connectedleadersacademy.com to stay engaged and informed. The journey of change is ongoing. Let's move forward together.